It was a typical Friday night, and my friends and I decided to have a little get-together at my place. We were just chilling in the living room, watching movies, and having a few beers. Around 9 p.m., we started getting hungry. We didn't feel like cooking, so we decided to order some pizza from this local place that we'd never tried before. They had good reviews online, so we thought, why not give it a shot? I called in the order, and the guy on the phone seemed normal enough. He said it would take about 30 minutes for the delivery, which was fine with us. We continued watching our movie and just hung out, not thinking much about it. About 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I went to the door, and there was this guy standing there with our pizzas. He looked pretty average at first glance, maybe in his late 30s, average build, wearing the pizza place's uniform. But there was something off about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe it was the way he was staring at me, or maybe it was just his overall demeanor, but I started feeling a bit uneasy. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. I paid him, tipped him a bit extra because the weather was crappy that night, and took the pizzas. But instead of leaving right away, he just stood there on my porch, smiling in this really unsettling way. "Is there something else you need?" I asked, trying to be polite but wanting him to leave. He shook his head slowly and said, "No, just making sure everything's okay. Enjoy your meal." Then he finally turned and walked away, but he did it slowly, almost like he was reluctant to leave. I closed the door, feeling a bit creeped out but trying to brush it off. I went back to the living room and told my friends about the weird delivery guy. We all laughed it off, joking about how some people are just strange. We dug into the pizzas and continued our movie marathon. About half an hour later, one of my friends, Mike, needed to step out for a smoke. He went out to the back porch, but after a couple of minutes, he rushed back in, looking pale and freaked out. "Dude, I think that delivery guy is still around," he said, sounding really scared. We all jumped up and ran to the back porch. Sure enough, there was the delivery guy, standing at the edge of my backyard, just staring at the house. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, watching us. It was super creepy. I decided to confront him. I stepped outside and shouted, "Hey, what are you doing here? You need to leave." He didn't respond at first, just kept staring. Finally, he said, "I just wanted to make sure you were satisfied with the delivery." "That's not your job," I shouted back, starting to get angry now. "Leave or I'm calling the cops." He looked at me for a moment longer, then nodded slowly and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I watched him go until I was sure he was gone, then went back inside. My friends and I were all pretty shaken up by then. We decided to stay alert and keep an eye out just in case he came back. We tried to go back to our movie, but none of us could really focus. We kept peeking out the windows, feeling paranoid. After about an hour, we started to relax a bit, thinking maybe it was just a one-time thing and he was gone for good. Around midnight, the doorbell rang again. My heart sank, and I knew it had to be him. I went to the door, and there he was, the same delivery guy, standing there with that creepy smile. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think I left something here earlier," he said, his eyes darting around like he was looking for something. "You didn't leave anything here. You need to leave now," I said firmly. He didn't move. Instead, he just kept looking around, like he was trying to find a way inside. I started feeling really scared now. I knew we needed to do something. I stepped back and closed the door, locking it quickly. I told my friends what was happening, and we all agreed it was time to call the cops. Mike grabbed his phone and dialed 911 while the rest of us started checking all the windows and doors, making sure everything was locked. While we were waiting for the police, we heard a noise coming from the back of the house. We all froze, listening. It sounded like someone was trying to open the back door. We all looked at each other, panic setting in. "Let's hide," Mike whispered. "We don't know what this guy might do." We decided to hide in my bedroom, which was at the back of the house but had a good lock on the door. We all piled in there, trying to stay quiet and keep calm. We could hear the sound of the back door being jiggled, and then footsteps moving around the side of the house. We waited, holding our breath, listening to every little sound. Finally, we heard the sirens in the distance, and I felt a huge wave of relief. The cops showed up quickly, and we could hear them talking to the delivery guy outside. After what felt like forever, there was a knock on the bedroom door. It was one of the police officers, telling us it was safe to come out. We explained everything that had happened, and they took our statements. They told us they had the guy in custody and would be taking him in for questioning. The officer mentioned that the delivery guy had been acting strangely for a while, and there had been other complaints about him, but nothing as serious as what we experienced. They assured us they would handle it and told us to call if we had any more issues. After the cops left, we all sat down in the living room, trying to calm down and process what had happened. None of us felt like watching movies anymore, so we just sat there, talking about how crazy the night had been. It took a while for us to feel safe again, but eventually, we all went to bed. I didn't sleep much that night, and I kept waking up feeling like someone was watching me. Looking back, I still get chills thinking about that night. It was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had, and it made me realize how quickly things can go from normal to terrifying. We were lucky nothing worse happened, but it's definitely a night I'll never forget. So, if you ever get a weird feeling about someone, trust your gut, and always make sure your doors are locked. So I work at my family's restaurant, a small but busy place that's been around for years. We serve all kinds of food and we get a lot of delivery orders. One night my shift started like any other. It was a Friday evening, and we were getting slammed with orders. I was working the delivery shift, so I was in and out of the restaurant all night. Around 8 p.m., we got an order from an address I'd never been to before. It wasn't too far out, maybe a 20-minute drive, but it was in a part of town I wasn't familiar with. I grabbed the food and loaded it into my car, then punched the address into my GPS. Everything seemed normal as I started driving. The drive took me out of the busy part of town and into a quieter, more rural area. The streets got narrower and the houses were spaced farther apart. Eventually, I was driving down a long, winding road with no streetlights. It was pitch dark, and the only light came from my car's headlights. I started to feel a bit uneasy. The road seemed to go on forever, and there were no signs of any houses, just trees and darkness. I double-checked the address and the GPS, and it all seemed correct, so I kept going. Finally, I saw a mailbox at the side of the road with the address I was looking for. I turned into the driveway, which was more like a dirt path, and followed it until I reached a small, isolated house. The house looked old and worn down, like no one had lived there for years. I parked my car and got out with the food. There were no lights on in the house, which was odd considering someone had just ordered dinner. I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, but still nothing. I started to get a really bad feeling about this. I decided to call the number that had placed the order. It rang a few times, and then someone picked up, but they didn't say anything. I could hear breathing on the other end, but no words. "Hello? This is your delivery driver. I'm at your house, but no one's answering the door," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The breathing stopped and there was a long silence. Then in a low, almost whispering voice, the person said, "Leave. Now." I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned around and saw that my car was the only vehicle around. The place was completely deserted. I didn't need to be told twice. I hurried back to my car, got in, and started the engine. As I was backing out of the driveway, my headlights caught something in the rearview mirror. A figure was standing at the edge of the trees just outside the range of the lights. I couldn't see their face, but they were watching me. I didn't wait to find out who it was. I sped down the driveway and back onto the main road. I was driving fast, trying to get back to civilization as quickly as possible, but the road seemed even longer and more twisted than before. I was getting more and more lost, and my GPS wasn't much help. It kept recalculating, like it couldn't figure out where I was. After what felt like forever, I finally saw some lights in the distance. I followed them and eventually found my way back to a main road. I pulled over at a gas station and just sat there for a while, trying to calm down and make sense of what had just happened. I called my boss and told him I was heading back to the restaurant. He asked if everything was okay, and I told him about the weird delivery. He sounded concerned but didn't push for details. He just told me to come back safely. When I got back to the restaurant, I told my coworkers what had happened. They were all pretty freaked out and told me I should have called the cops. I didn't think of that at the time. I was just focused on getting out of there. I never did find out who placed that order or why they did it. The house looked abandoned, and I don't know who the person was that I saw at the edge of the trees. The whole thing still gives me the creeps. I've done a lot of deliveries, but nothing like this has ever happened to me before. It was a night I'll never forget, and it made me realize how quickly things can go from normal to terrifying. If you ever get a bad feeling about a place or a situation, trust your instincts and get out of there. Stay safe out there, everyone. And always be careful when you're alone at night.